The sun burned mercilessly over the endless stretch of Arizona desert, turning the air into shimmering waves of heat. Every step his horse took kicked up little clouds of red dust, coating his boots and chapping his already dry lips. Sam Hargrove had ridden since dawn, his jaw clenched, his eyes narrowed beneath the shadow of his worn, sweat-stained Stetson. He wasn't just riding for the sake of it, he was chasing down the men who had stolen from him. 2 horses, 3 rifles, and a week's worth of supplies gone in the dead of night. And now, with every mile, the heat and the gnawing anger inside him seemed to blend into one blistering flame. The desert was a lonely place, and Sam knew its dangers better than most. He'd been a rancher, a trail guide, and sometimes a lawman, when the need arose. But today he was just a man with nothing but his horse and his rage to keep him company. Sweat stung his eyes, but he didn't slow down. The faint trail of hoof prints ahead was all he cared about. Whoever had crossed him would pay, and he wasn't the forgiving type. The sound came first, faint, almost lost in the wind. A desperate cry. Sam pulled the reins hard, his horse skidding to a halt, nostrils flaring. He skinned the barren landscape, expecting to see buzzards circling over some unfortunate soul. But instead, far off to the east, something caught his eye, a small, flickering movement among the rocks. He urged his horse forward, wary but curious. The cry came again, louder this time, and unmistakably human. When he crested the rise, the scene below made him stop cold. 2 young women, their dark hair tangled and faces streaked with sweat and dust, were struggling to fend off 3 men in tattered shirts and bandanas pulled up over their mouths. The attackers had ropes, and from the way the women's wrists were already bruised and raw, they'd been dragged against their will. Sam could tell immediately they were Apache, proud, defiant, and refusing to yield even in the face of danger. One of them swung a broken branch at her assailant, her eyes blazing, while the other shielded her sister, shouting curses in her native tongue. Sam didn't think. The anger he'd carried all morning shifted into something sharper, protective, almost primal. He spurred his horse, charging down the slope, his voice cutting through the hot air like a whip crack. "Let him go," he roared, his hand going straight to the revolver at his hip. The men spun around, startled, but only for a moment. Then one of them drew his own gun. Sam's first shot kicked up dust inches from the man's boots, and his second hit the bandana clean off his face. The would-be kidnappers hesitated, and that was all Sam needed. He rode straight into them, his horse slamming one sideways, and knocked another flat with a brutal swing of his rifle butt. The third bolted, cursing, scrambling up the rocks. Sam didn't bother to chase. He stayed planted between the women and the danger, his revolver trained steady on the 2 who hadn't gotten away. The men saw the fire in his eyes and decided they liked living too much to test him. They backed off, hands raised, before disappearing into the shimmering heat of the desert. Only when the last of them was gone did Sam dismount, his boots crunching on the dry earth as he approached the women slowly, not wanting to scare them more than they already were. The taller of the 2 stood her ground, chin lifted, even as her hands trembled. "We didn't need your help," she said in halting English, though her voice betrayed exhaustion. Sam gave a short, humorless chuckle. "Maybe not," he said, "but you've got it anyway." He pulled out his canteen, offering it to her first. She hesitated, then took it, letting her sister drink before herself. Up close, Sam could see the bruises on their arms, the dried blood on one girl's temple, and the way both of them swayed on their feet. "You're a long way from anywhere." "Safe," he said, glancing around the vast emptiness. "Where's your camp?" The younger sister spoke softly in Apache, and the elder replied in kind, her gaze never leaving Sam's face. "Finally," she said, "we were taken in the night. Our people, they're 2 days' walk from here." Sam looked out across the horizon. 2 days on foot out here was a death sentence. Without water and shade, he felt that old anger stirring again, but this time it wasn't for himself. "Then you're coming with me," he said firmly. "I'll get you there." The elder sister's eyes narrowed in suspicion. "Why, you're not one of us." "No," Sam admitted, adjusting his hat against the sun. "But I've buried enough good people in this desert. I'm not adding you to that count." For a long moment, she studied him, as if weighing the truth in his words. Finally, she gave a single nod. Sam helped them onto his horse, both women, clinging to each other as they settled behind him. He could feel their exhaustion in the way they leaned forward, barely holding on. As they rode away, Sam couldn't shake the heat in his chest. He told himself it was just the sun, or the anger at the men who dared to hurt them. But deep down, he knew it was something else, something unexpected. He had set out that morning to settle his own scores, but now it felt like the desert had given him a different purpose entirely. And as the wind carried the faint scent of sagebrush and distant rain, he knew this wasn't going to be the end of their story, only the beginning. Under the burning desert sun, the day bled into an orange haze, the kind that distorted the horizon and made the sand shimmer like liquid gold. The cowboy, Jack Colton, sat on the edge of a weathered rock outcrop, his hat pulled low to shield his eyes, his lips pressed into a tight, restless line. He had set out that morning with a single goal: to drive his cattle toward the northern grazing lands before the summer heat claimed them. But that plan had been interrupted in a way he hadn't expected by two young Apache women, exhausted and on the verge of collapse, whom he'd found being chased by a group of rough riders with rifles slung over their shoulders and greed in their eyes. The rescue had been messy. A short exchange of gunfire left one man clutching his shoulder, and the others scattering like coyotes who'd gotten too close to a fire. Jack didn't ask the women much, just handed them his canteen, loaded them onto his spare horse, and rode hard until they were miles away from trouble. Now, as the desert cooled into evening, the three of them found themselves in the quiet shelter of an arroyo, the rock walls giving them a momentary sense of safety. The two women sat close together on a blanket Jack had thrown down, their dark hair loose and windswept, faces lined with fatigue, but eyes sharp with an unspoken strength. The older of the two, maybe in her early 20s, was named Nita. She had spoken the most, explaining in a low, guarded tone that they had been forced from their camp when men came looking for something. She didn't say what, and Jack didn't press. The younger one, Tala, perhaps barely 18, spoke even less, only nodding or whispering short answers when Nita glanced her way. Jack leaned against his saddle, chewing a piece of dry jerky, his eyes flicking between them. He wasn't a man who enjoyed company, especially not strangers, and yet there was something in the way the two carried themselves that drew his attention. They weren't helpless, and they weren't begging for his help, either. They had survived the open desert, which meant grit ran in their blood. But still, the tension in their shoulders and the way their gazes drifted to the horizon told him they were running from more than just men on horseback. You got folks looking for you, Jack said finally, his voice rough from days of riding in the dust. Nita's eyes met his, steady but cautious. Yes, but they're not our people. She glanced toward Tala, who kept her gaze lowered. They want something we carry. They will keep hunting us. Jack tilted his head, studying her, feeling the old instinct to walk away rising in his chest. Trouble was something he'd learned to avoid, because trouble meant bullets, lawmen, and sometimes graves. But this was different. Something in Nita's voice, not fear exactly, but a determined, almost protective tone, made him think of his younger sister. Gone many years now. He sighed, tipped his hat back, and muttered, "Well, if they find you now, they'll have to go through me first." For a long moment, neither woman spoke. Then Nita's lips curved just slightly, not quite a smile, but the closest thing to gratitude he'd seen from her yet. Night fell quick and sharp in the desert, the air cooling with each passing minute. Jack built a small fire in the shelter of the rocks, careful to keep the flames low so they wouldn't be spotted. The women huddled close to the warmth, their shadows dancing against the canyon walls. Tala finally looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the FIRELIGHT. "Why did you help us?" she asked softly. Jack poked at the fire with a stick, keeping his gaze on the glowing embers. "'Cause you looked like you needed it, and 'cause I don't much like the kind of men who were chasing you." She nodded slowly, as if that answer was enough, but for Jack, it wasn't that simple. The truth was, when he saw them running across the open desert, skirts torn and hair flying in the wind, something inside him, something he thought had been long buried, had stirred. He couldn't name it, not yet. All he knew was that the sight of them had struck a chord deep in his chest, one that still hummed even now as the night grew still around them. Long after the women had fallen asleep, Jack sat by the fire, staring into the flames. The desert stretched endlessly beyond the shadows, the wind carrying whispers of the chase that might not be far behind. Somewhere between the restless crackle of the fire and the quiet breathing of the two women, Jack realized the truth. This wasn't just a rescue anymore. Something about Nita's calm defiance and Tala's quiet resilience had hooked into him, making him feel responsible. And though he didn't want to admit it, maybe even protective in a way that was starting to feel dangerous, not for them, But for him, he reached for his rifle, laid it across his lap, and leaned back against the rock wall. Tomorrow, he told himself, they'd head north, keep ahead of whoever was chasing them. But a part of him knew that no matter where they went, his path had already changed. And maybe, just maybe, he was ready for it.